Welcome back to the Mama Bear Diaries. I'm the host, Deborah Giesling, and it goes without saying, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a clinician, but I'm going to keep saying it anyway. I'm a mother, and I'm an advocate for my son and others and family members who are affected by serious mental illness. This isn't something I planned on doing when I was this age. I wanted to be a forest ranger and retired by now, but God had other plans with that. So here we are. And today we're on primer number 8 already. Woo, we're going through these. Today's topic is not a really popular topic, and a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about it openly, but it needs to be talked about openly. And that is the topic of peer support. Peer support has become very popular, and it is used by almost all of our mental health systems across this country, and I think in other countries as well. And what that is, if you're not familiar with that term, peer support, it's a person who has a mental illness, who struggles with a mental illness, who works within the behavioral health system to either at a clinic as a support for somebody. And they also use peer support specialists in some of the group homes. And so, for the most part, it is a good idea. As with all government ideas, there are flaws because we tend to do things one size fits all. And so I've got a little bit of experience on this subject since my son's been in the system for quite a while, and it's hard for me to talk about it because my son is a peer, and I know some incredible stories of where people that have mental illness have gotten jobs within the system and are doing a fantastic job, and they are helping other people because of their experience. But for the most part, those individuals have gotten to a place of stability, and they found their niche. But unfortunately, as with all government programs, the oversight and training is not so great. So in 2021, the Arizona Auditor General's office did a report on access. They studied how peer support was working, and the findings were very concerning. For example, they found out of 23 peer specialists that they reviewed that 21 of them did not meet state or federal requirements for training. That's a high percentage. This not only jeopardizes the person who has a mental illness, the peer who's working, but it also puts somebody who has a mental illness at risk as well. We're talking about two vulnerable individuals, and if our state government is not training them adequately, they're also found that they were not overseeing the peers adequately. And they are supposed to have someone who is working with them. And for the most part, they found that was not happening. And so, they ran. I'm not sure if that bill ever passed. There was a peer support standards bill. I've got to look back on that. But that was one of the most uncomfortable hearings that I had to testify on, because I had a lot of experience in my son's home where he lives. It is staffed 24/7, and early on, there were peers who were working some of those shifts. Now, the men in my son's home are on the more severe level. They are still symptomatic. They're doing well. They just need a lot of support. But some of the individuals that have been in there have struggled themselves. And my son, at one time, there was one individual where he said, "Mom, I think she needs to be in the hospital." And she was hired to be there with 4 men who have a serious mental illness. And so I don't want to go into details. I did testify about this because I want to respect that that dear lady, to me, that really wasn't her fault. That was a system that wasn't recognizing she needed help, and that probably wasn't the best place for her to be working. And she did want to work, which is very admirable. That's just one example. I know of many other stories where a peer has gotten injured or hurt. A lot of times, peers struggle themselves, so they can't show up for work sometimes due to symptoms of their mental illness. So there's a lot of issues with it, but the biggest one is not on the peers. The biggest one is on our system that does not train these individuals adequately. I can remember visiting an individual who was very sick in the hospital with their family. And when they were released, I saw a post from that individual a week later. I'm not even kidding, talking about how they had taken the peer support training and they became a peer support specialist. Um, that individual, that they should have recognized that that individual still needed time to stabilize and before they became a peer support specialist. So that's a concern that I've always had, and I think the standards need to be raised. The training definitely needs to be raised. These individuals, for the most part, a lot of them are not trained in psychosis or the symptoms of schizophrenia. So that's a problem too. I mean, that would be similar to, say, we have people that have had cancer going in and working with other people who have cancer as if they were an expert. Just because they experienced the cancer, they could help that person with cancer. I mean, uh, that's kind of the same. That's kind of what's happening within the mental health system. And personally, I don't think we pay the peers enough, and I think that is something that is attractive to the government. I think that's why they laud peer supports, because they can pay them a lower rate, and they're obviously not investing in them with training, and that was proven by the Arizona Auditor General's report. Speaking of accountability, something else. This was actually one of my pastor's ideas. I'm not going to claim that this was my idea, but one of the ideas he had, as I was advocating, was that our system implement surveys, the behavioral health system implement surveys. I mean, when I go to my pharmacy, when I take my dog to the groomer, when all other appointments that I go to, most of the time I will come home and I will have an email in my inbox asking me to fill out a survey. My husband just had open heart surgery. I got tons of surveys from the hospital, from the doctor's office. Just they wanted to get my feedback on how the service was, how my husband was treated. And there is nothing like that in the behavioral health system. And so last year, a bill was passed in Arizona that asked Access, that is our state's Medicaid provider, that's what we call it, Access. And ironically, that stands for Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment Services. So think about that, cost containment, which they do that very well. They so they were tasked. They basically were tasked by the legislature to come up with or look into what it would take for them to come up with a survey system for individuals who have a serious mental illness and their families to fill out forms and to give feedback for. And so they did do that report. I'm going to put that, I'll link it in my post here. And they estimated that it would cost the state $15 million per year to do this. There was a lot of upfront cost as well. So I'll put that link to that report. The self-reporting. There's no real basis or depth of why they're telling us it costs $15 million. My son is on Access, and when he goes to his primary care physician that is paid by Access, I get a survey, but they don't want to implement it for the severely mentally ill. And you can just imagine why. if they did implement it, and if there is an upfront cost, I guarantee you it's going to save lives. Because if I'm working with an individual who has a serious mental illness, even in a group home, I'm thinking, gosh, that this person's mom or this person is going to fill out a survey on me. So I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to be kind. I'm not going to mess up. There is no accountability system in place at all for this population. It's like we're still in the dark ages. I mean, my little puppy dog gets better care because I can give feedback, and that person who's taking care of her knows that I'm going to do that, that the owner is going to do that. That's not happening here. So I'm just wondering, does Access care about the quality of care that these individuals are receiving? Don't they want to know how their providers are doing? Apparently not, because they're telling the state, it's just going to be too much money. That's $15 million a year to implement this system, to implement a survey system. I kind of cry foul on that. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents for today. I believe something that my husband and I have talked about over and over is it'd be great to have people who have a mental illness work for us when we get our homes, but we want to have mentors. We want to have people that are in the community, that are healthy and living a good life and want to give back. We want to have mentors help people that have a serious mental illness. And so instead of that's not to say we wouldn't hire peers or have peers, that there's not a place for peers. I think there is. But that can't be the only thing. And I think that's also a disconnect in our system that, we move from the institutions to community. But did we really? We're still institutionalized. These individuals are still tucked away in these homes and without real meaningful connection to the community. And so what does that look like? Well, it looks like people that want to give back, people that maybe they want to help an individual fill out a job application. You don't have to be paid by the government. You can be a mentor. You can be a volunteer. You can be a friend in the church. You can help somebody learn how to cook, eat healthier. One time we had a fireman come to my son's group home, and he taught the men how to make several meals with $10, because that's what the firemen have to do. They have to cook for themselves. And so he took that skill, and it took maybe an hour. He came over and the guys loved it. So that would be a mentor, somebody who's got a skill and has some time to give. And hey, I'm going to pass this on to somebody that might need some help. And so anyway, I like the idea of mentors, and let me know what you think about that. And let me know your ideas. Let me know how else you think a mentor could be involved with somebody who has a serious mental illness. Isn't that kind of a novel idea? I think that's what's kind of been missing from the equation all along. We've been missing from the equation, and we think the government, is doing a good job over here with all of their self-reporting. So anyway, thanks for listening. I've got to pull up the outro music here. All right, here we go. Let's close out on. So think about that. Think about the place that mentors could have, and maybe God's calling you to be a mentor somehow. What does that look like? And Brown Eyes, this is all for you. I love you. You're a rock star. Thanks for listening again. If you made it this far. Bye bye.